RPG games would not be around if it weren't for the release of a well-known tabletop game. That game being D&D, also known as Dungeons & Dragons. In 1974, Gary Gygax and Dane Arneson worked together to create Dungeons & Dragons, the first of many tabletop games that flooded communities with imagination and storytelling. This tabletop game heavily influenced early versions of role-play games, just because of the mechanics involved. The game had character classes you could choose, the race and origin of your characters, stats that described how strong or weak a character was. It had a leveling system that improved those skills, and campaigns, adventures that connect you with those characters as you play. As time passed, the rise of Dungeons & Dragons rose, so much so that during the late 70s to early 80s, hobbyists, mostly college students that had access to such equipment, were creating their own types of D&D style games, using campus computers or mainframes. Thanks to the PDP-10 mainframe, text-based adventure games were being made, examples being Colossal Cave Adventure in 1976 by William Crowther and Don Woods. We also had Zork, 1977 by Infocom. Plateau had games like the D&D game in 1975 by Ray Wood and Gary Weisenhunt. They also had Oubliette, the 1977 game by Jim Schwager, and Moria, the 1975 game by Paul Resch and Larry Kemp, and also Eric Hagstrom. Damn, that's a lot of people. Computers during this time were considered powerful and completely different to our current generation of computers, but at this time they had quite the technical limitation. When creating games, developers were restricted to text-only interfaces like Zork or Colossal Cave Adventures, or they had to use basic tile graphics like Sword and Sorcery, which when played often would run pretty slowly or would require the player to input commands through a text parser. Memory constraints forced designers to focus more on the system and imagination rather than the visuals we see today. It focused more on statistics, descriptive writing, and turn-based logic. Despite the challenges and limitations, this helped shape the identity of early iterations of role-playing games. Although mainframes and early versions of computers were available but frowned upon at most universities because computers were being used outside their main purpose, early home computers were starting to take a rise, such as the Apple II, Commodore 64, and even the IMB PC. These played a crucial role in transforming the RPG game genre, from the typical hobbyists that would experiment projects at home or at their own college to a recognizable genre. These types of computers gave independent developers and small studios the ability to create more out of their games, including the ability to have a basic save feature, basic style of graphics, and larger worlds to explore. Games like Calibif, the 1979 game created by Richard Garriott, or even Ultima, the 1981 game also made by Richard Garriott. There's also Wizardry, the 1981 game by Sir Tech. Being able to have enough memory and storage to support character data, maps, inventories, and multiple gameplay systems running all at once was crazy and bizarre at that time, but since it's been improving, this allowed RPGs to move from shared mainframes into our own homes. Our personal computers, where the players can invest dozens of hours into developing a single character for their story. During the same time this was going on, cultural influences were beginning to shape and tone the style of early role-playing games. The popularity of fantasy novels, especially the works of authors like J.R.R. Tolkien, the creator of Lord of the Rings, Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian, and even Michael Moorcock's series of science fiction and fantasy. These different mediums inspired the idea of the medieval settings, monsters, and even the magic system, and also the ability to create heroic archetypes seen in RPGs. During the 70s and 80s, there was a rise in computer clubs, arcades, and even computer labs in college, all which created communities where young developers shared ideas and prototypes. This helped push the public's fascination with adventure and imagination, which was fueled by tabletop games, fantasy fiction, and early blockbuster films like Star Wars. All these cultural forces combined to give role-playing games a unique creative environment where storytelling, exploration, and even player-driven narrative felt not only natural, but necessary. As computers started hitting homes, developers began experimenting with ideas that would help establish the foundation of role-playing games. The first game I'll mention is Calibif World of Doom. It was a game created in 1979 by Richard Garriott, Although the game was simple, Kelebeth introduced key mechanics such as player stats, equipment, and even a basic map navigation, showing players and developers that mechanics from tabletop role-playing games could be translated into code and implemented into games. Garriott refined and expanded these ideas later on in 1981 to create a game called Ultima, which featured a larger world, proper quest structures, and an advanced progression system. It focuses on exploration, narrative, and player-driven decision, making Ultima one of the earliest known commercially successful RPGs. Around the same time this was going on though, Surtech released Wizardry, a party-based dungeon crawler that was created by Andrew Greenberg and Robert Woodhead. This game gave the ability to select your class, your detailed character stats, hit points, status effects, and even personalized character names, helping solidify many mechanics that would become standard in later RPG games. These early titles shaped player expectations for what an RPG should be. Players began anticipating certain features when it came to their own games. These include such features as leveling system, dungeon exploration, loot collection, inventory management, turn-based combat, and customizable characters with unique abilities. The idea that players' choices, stats, and strategies could be meaningfully impactful towards gameplay is amazing. It became such a central idea when it came to RPGs that it became a known necessity for players. Because of this, elements like experience points, equipment upgrades, and narrative quests quickly became a core design pillar that would be later used and implemented in other RPG games. By the mid-80s, these foundations led to the first major split in RPG design. In 1986, Japan, Yuji Horii created the first JRPG, known as Dragon Quest. This game streamlined the complex systems of Western RPG into a simpler, story-focused format that was accessible to inexperienced players. It emphasized clear characters, emotional storytelling, and well-made turn-based combat system. Later on, in 1987, Final Fantasy, which was made by Hironobu Sakaguchi, which further popularized this type of approach by adding cinematic presentations, character-driven narratives. Meanwhile, Western RPGs continued to push toward open-ended worlds, player freedom, and complex simulation systems. Yet, this divergence created two distinct RPG traditions: CRPG, also known as computer role-playing games, and JRPG, Japanese role-playing games. Each of these influenced different audiences and shaped the genre's growth for decades. As the RPG genre started to mature and grow during the 80s and 90s, it grew beyond its early dungeon crawling roots and started to branch into many unique styles, mechanics, and thematic directions. One of the major developments was the rise of Japanese role-playing games, especially from the popular game Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. As I mentioned before, these games introduced a more narrative-driven structure, memorable characters, and a fixed party system, creating a new subgenre that emphasizes emotional storytelling rather than player-driven improvisation, and their success helped solidify stories in RPGs in the global market and attracted younger and more casual audiences who connected with their approachable style. Western studios continue to innovate by focusing on players' agencies and system complexity. A few examples being BioWare's 1998 game Baldur's Gate and Black Isle's 1997 game Fallout shaped the computer role-playing game subgenre. These implemented branching dialogue choices, a more choice system and feature, and persistent worlds affected by players' decisions. These changes pushed RPGs toward deeper narrative interactivity, influencing players' expectations that their choices should shape the story and game world they play. Then we reached the 2000s. The genre diversified itself with other genres. One example is the 2007 BioWare game Mass Effect. This game blended third-person shooter mechanics with traditional RPG systems. Although this would change later in the series, you could still say it helped establish the action RPG and hybrid RPG trends that appeal to a wider audience seeking a more defined gameplay. Around the same time, we were playing games like The Elder Scrolls Morrowind in 2002 and Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. These games popularized the idea of open world RPGs, which gave the player freedom to explore the vast landscapes with minimum linear constraints. These titles were the key when it came to attracting players who valued immersive worlds and emergent storytelling. As time went on, the industry trends shifted alongside players' demographics, which helped contribute towards the RPG's growth. As games became more accessible and diverse, developers experimented with stylistic innovation. In fact, indie studios were an immense help when it came to redefining RPG expectations. Games like 2015's Undertale and 2019's Disco Elysium emphasized unconventional storytelling, the use of good and evil with a morality system, and psychological depth within its story. These types of games show that RPGs can succeed without the traditional combat or power fantasy mechanics that we have seen through traditional RPGs, proving that the genre can be quite flexible and played correctly. Even though the RPG genre evolved into a broad, diverse ecosystem shaped by the technological advancement of cultural influences, players' expectations changed as time went on. The results show that a genre that now includes everything from turn-based actions to fully immersive worlds and narrative stories can contribute to the ongoing innovation that defines RPGs today. Today's RPGs are defined by large open worlds, player choice, and blended genres. Many RPGs mix action, strategy, or narrative gameplay, leading to games like The Witcher 3, Elden Ring, Mass Effect, and even Persona. The genre now ranges from combat-heavy adventures to story-driven character dramas. Online communities and streaming have also changed how RPGs are experienced. Platforms like Twitch and YouTube turn long RPGs into shared storytelling events. Platforms like Twitch and YouTube turn long RPGs into a shared storytelling events, while fan wikis and modding scenes keep older titles alive for years. Meanwhile, indie developers have pushed the genre in new creative directions, using unique art styles and personal storytelling in games like Undertale, Disco Elysium, and Amori. Looking forward, RPGs are likely to continue expanding player choice through better AI, procedural worlds, and more reactive storytelling. Both modern cinematic RPGs and classic turn-based styles are expected to coexist, showing how broad and flexible the genre has become. As time passes, the RPG genre is important because it continues to shape how games are made. The more we discover new genres and games, the RPG is important. It helped because it shaped how games are made, how stories are told, and how players experience virtual worlds. Without RPGs, we probably wouldn't have the games we have today.